Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are all doing well. In this video, we are looking at a new video segment. I might have done this a couple years ago, but this is the first time I'm doing it for this year. Week 3 value picks. Basically, this lineup is filled with all the value picks at each position that I'm looking at pretty closely this week. As we get further through the NFL season, we'll just continue to have more and more guys piled up on the injury report, a lot more guys out, a lot more guys with the questionable tag, the doubtful tag. As the week goes on, if they're not practicing Thursday, Friday, you can kind of get an idea that they're not going to play. So this is just looking at that and then looking at just some of the mispricing on Draftkings. Some of my favorite value picks at each position. So let's get started. We'll kind of touch on each one of these guys and why I like them a lot this week. So before we get into it, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, hit the like button. If you guys want me to keep doing this every week, then let me know. I can make this a weekly segment. But at quarterback, Justin Fields, we just got word a couple days ago that he's going to start. Andy Dalton has been ruled out for this contest. Now, it is a matchup against this Browns defense. A Browns defense that hasn't played very well so far this year. They did good in the beginning against the Chiefs, but that was mainly because they were keeping the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hand by running the football a lot in the first half and controlling the clock. We saw what happened in the second half. Mahomes does what Mahomes does, led them to a comeback. Week 2, they actually let Tyrod Taylor go up and down the field. He led them to 2 touchdown drives in the first half, and then he got banged up. But Taylor was putting up monster fantasy scores. He had a rushing touchdown and was only had 1 incompletion, I believe, threw a touchdown pass as well. Now, Fields making his first start. We know he has a ton of talent. He's probably going to be a little bit shaky, but what we love about Justin Fields is that his mobility. In just like half of football last year, he ran the ball 10 times. So if you do the math on that, that's about 20 attempts if he played the full game. Now, that's a ton. That's more than some running backs. I probably think they want to limit him to about 15 attempts at the most. But that's still, you're getting running back numbers out of Fields with the attempts. He's going to throw the football probably 15, at least 15. I would expect 25-ish times. Assuming they get down, then he might even have to throw 30-plus times. But he's a guy that will get it done with his legs, like Jalen Hurts, like Lamar Jackson, like some of these other running quarterbacks. He has that type of speed. And at 52 against a Browns defense that has some good spots, Fields should be able to escape the pressure a little bit. And if he gets out in open field, look out because Fields can make the most of that. Running backs, we have Kenyon Drake at a 55. So Josh Jacobs is very questionable for this one. It doesn't look like he is going to suit up. Now, that makes me like Kenyon Drake. People just looking at the box score, they'll see oh, Kenyon Drake only got 7 carries. Peyton Barber got 13 carries, but that's not really telling you the story. If you look at the snap counts here, Drake was out there for a ton of snaps, 71% of snaps. He got a big jump forward. Barber got 13 touches and just 19 offensive snaps. So when Barber was in there, you knew they were going to run the football. You got no work in the passing game as you wouldn't expect. The passing game volume belongs to Kenyon Drake, and he's still going to get close to 10 carries on the ground. Now, in this matchup, I absolutely love it. It was a tough matchup. First 2 matchups have been pretty difficult to run the football, which is why he's kind of been doing most of his damage in the air. But this week, we saw what this Miami team gave up to the Bills on the ground. Singletary rushed for over 120 yards. Moss had 2 touchdowns. So I am looking to target probably a very low-owned Kenyon Drake at $5,500. There's a lot of valuable or a lot of cheap running backs in this range, like Mike Davis at 51 against the Giants. You have Gaskin here. You have, if you're looking to pay up a little bit more, you have James Robinson, Edmonds, Williams, Swift. Those guys I think will all be way more popular than Drake. So if you're looking for a tournament option, a pivot, I think Drake kind of makes a lot of sense this week. I don't see him being talked about by a lot, but looking at the snap counts, looking at the matchup, wouldn't be shocked if Drake happens to find his way into the end zone. And I would assume that if he gets 7 to 10 carries on the ground, that he's not going to look at under 10 yards again. I would expect him to be in the 20s or 30s, and then maybe even get 100 total yards if he does some damage in the passing game. We know he can. Raiders' offense has been moving the ball well, so he can sneak into the end zone if he gets a pass. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is only 48, so he's just an obvious kind of value pick at the bottom of the running back position. He's $4,800. He's cheaper than a bunch of guys that he shouldn't be cheaper than, even though he hasn't been great at all this year. The fumble cost him the game last week, but he's still getting a ton of touches. He got 13, then he got 17 in week 1. A little bit of a different story here in terms of a matchup. Going up against this Chargers defense that hasn't been able to stop anybody on the ground. We saw Tony Pollard tear them up last week, and we also saw Elliott do some damage, even though Pollard was getting more work. But both of those running backs did some damage on the ground against the Chargers, and in week 1, we saw Gibson have a decent game against them. So Edwards-Helaire, even though a team that doesn't like to run the football a lot, they have a 31 total. So hopefully he can sneak into the end zone. Normally you're going to get double-digit fantasy points out of Edwards-Helaire because he's going to catch a couple of passes. Last week was just weird that he didn't catch a single one, didn't even have a target. But normally you're looking at like about 5-ish, like 3 to 5 targets. That would accumulate to like hopefully 7 to 8 or maybe more DraftKings points, and then you'll get some work on the ground. Another Chiefs guy that I have in the value pick is McCole Hardman. Just a solid value option. Without Watkins this year, he's going to, on paper, he's a number 2. We saw guys last week like Pringle and Robinson sneak into the end zone, but I think over the course of the season, you're going to see Hardman kind of separate himself and be that number 2 wide receiver alongside Hill, although we know is basically a number 3 wide receiver because Kelsey is number 1 on the team in terms of just getting targets. But Hardman, I would expect him to maybe get 8 targets around that again. This should be a high-scoring game. I would expect it to be semi-close, only a 6.5-point spread. So KC's going to have to throw the football all game. Would bode well for Hardman to get a similar amount of targets. Maybe we know with all these Chiefs guys have a good chance to get into the end zone with just how much they score every single week. And his price tag has also dipped by a lot. So I would like to take advantage of that. Quintez Cephas at $3,900. He looks to benefit without Tyrell Williams. He had a touchdown last week. He almost had 2 touchdowns. Almost had an unbelievable grab. But the thing that you like to see with him is if you look at the snap counts for the Lions here. Week 1, it was Cephas was like the 5th most played guy at receiver. So we've had Raymond played more snaps, Brown played more snaps, Benson, Williams, Cephas. But week 2, a different story. Without Williams, they made an involvement to get to Cephas early and often, and he ended up playing the most snaps on the team by far. He played 15 more snaps than the second most wide receiver on the team, which was Raymond, who only played 36 snaps, and then you had St. Brown played 34. But Cephas clearly separated himself in terms of the snap share at wide receiver. And I think that's going to continue going forward just because he has definitely a way bigger body than any of these other guys. Like Khalif Raymond is like a slot guy. He shouldn't be out there starting on the outside. Brown is still very thin, rookie. So Cephas, they're going to rely on him. You should be looking at like 6 to 8 targets this week. It's going to be another game that they're going to be trailing in mostly all of these games, having to come from behind, which Goff, we saw him. He's looked pretty decent this year in terms of just throwing the ball downfield and giving these guys chances. So he's not just checking down like he was at times with the Rams. He's willing to take some shots this year, and Cephas can clearly benefit. So 39, he's not expensive enough for a number 1 receiver. And Baltimore is just so banged up on the secondary that teams have been moving the ball against them very easily. KJ Osborne, another guy on the Vikings that has looked surprised this year. He has 15 targets through 2 weeks. The price tag on him hasn't increased. It won't be long before he's in the 5K range because the Vikings, basically, they run, mainly you're going to expect 2 receivers to really dominate. But this year, they're not getting very much from their tight ends because they traded away Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith, who was going to be a big part of their offense. He is like banged up. He's not going to play for a while. So Conklin is mostly known for blocking. You know, he did get some work last week, but you don't want Conklin streaking down the middle of the field. So they're running a lot of 3 wide receiver sets and just having the tight end block a lot. So you have Osborne really benefiting from that, just without having a true tight end with all the injuries. Well, basically to Irv Smith on IR and then not having Rudolph anymore. So normally you would expect like Irv Smith or Rudolph to be that guy and the third be the 3rd most targeted guy, but it's Osborne now. He's even surprised some people and been able to make big plays downfield. He had a 64-yard touchdown last week early in that game, and then I think that was on the first drive. And didn't do much after that, but he's still getting targeted. So 5 targets the rest of the way. That's a good sign. He had 9 in week 1. PPR side like DraftKings, $3,500. 10 fantasy points would be great value at this price tag, and he has a chance to get you over 20. At tight end wise, like I mentioned on my first video, like I don't see myself going that cheap at tight end this week. I don't need to. So in terms of the value tight ends that I'm looking at, it would be Hawkinson is the value that I like, because he's a number one guy on the team. He's going to be the most heavily targeted guy that Goff just locks into. We saw him last year with the Rams and in years past with the Rams. He loved the tight ends with Higbee and Everett. They've had huge weeks and huge seasons with Goff. This year it's going to be Hawkinson's time. Hadn't really had the same connection with Stafford last year, but this year Hawkinson's looking like the guy why the Lions drafted him so early in the draft. 20 targets, 16 catches, 2 touchdowns, making plays downfield, getting open. And this week against Baltimore, I think he's going to continue to impress. And it won't be long before he is, closing in on like the high 6K or even the mid 6K price tag. So we're still getting a bargain at that price tag. You could look to like Gronk with Antonio Brown not looking like he might not play. He's on the COVID list. He has to test negative for twice in 24 hours or something like that. You have like Pitts here. You might have Noah Fant, but Hawkinson, I think. Basically, I'm looking at Kelsey, Waller, Hawkinson. I would throw Gronk in there, Pitts. Those are like the main tight ends I'm looking at. I'm not really looking to go super cheap. You could look to like Higbee if you wanted to, but I don't see myself really going to any of these 3K options. If you wanted to just punt with a punt in tournaments, like Max Williams did have 7 targets last week, but that's not, you can't really bank on that happening every single week, whereas you can bank on Hawkinson most likely getting close to 10 targets every single week. Marvin Jones Jr., former ex-Lion here. He's making some noise in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. 20 targets through the first 2 weeks, 2 touchdowns. Those 6 catches last week only turned into 55 yards, but Marvin Jones does give you that big play upside. He played the most snaps at wide receiver for them last week. And I would expect that to continue. They haven't gotten great production out of DJ Chark, who's kind of been up and down since midway point of last year. Chenault will hopefully be a big part of their future, but last week just had 2 catches, -3 yards. He was dealing with a shoulder injury earlier, so maybe he's not 100%. Marvin Jones Jr. is just a little bit too affordable right now. I would expect his price tag to be a little bit more expensive than this $4,900 tag. For a team that's going to be trailing in this game, they're going to have to throw a ton. Lawrence will probably get you like close to 300, if not more than 300 yards, which is how much he's going to have to throw the football. And a lot of that will be going to Marvin Jones. So need a guy in the high 5 or low 5K or the high 4K range. Definitely look to Marvin Jones. And then a value tight end or value defense right now is the Titans defense, just because I don't know if Wentz will play or not. He didn't practice again today, and they were using Brent Huntley and Eason. We're getting a lot of the first team reps. I think Huntley was getting more today, so it doesn't look like Wentz will play. Obviously, that can change. If Wentz does play, you can go up to a defense, but right now, assuming Wentz does not play, definitely like the Titans defense at home against a very banged up. Anytime you get this, even the Titans haven't been good this year, but anytime you get a chance to get a backup quarterback, a guy that is going to be prone to some turnovers, prone to some sacks in there at home, that's a recipe for success as a defense. And just icing on the cake that they're only $2,400. So that's about it for the value picks that I'm kind of looking at for week 3. Some of these guys are tournament plays. Some are definitely more, I think all these guys are tournament plays. Some are cash viable, like Edwards-Helaire. The wide receivers here, definitely all cash viable. Hawkinson, Jones. So that's about it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.